Hello, I'm Richard Emmett, the Program Director of the Blue Ridge Music Center, and I'd like to welcome you to our discussion series, Deep Roots, Many Voices. This series is part of a project by the Blue Ridge Music Center exploring diversity and inclusion in roots-based music. In this discussion series, we pair two musicians in each episode to talk about issues related to race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation, how these issues have been part of their personal stories, and the importance of celebrating diversity in the music world. These discussions highlight contributions to American roots-based music from the many voices that make up our nation and give us hope for a rich and diverse musical future. The series was coordinated and conceived by Blue Ridge Music Center Associate Director Marianne, who also moderates these discussions. I hope you enjoy the series. Thank you for joining us. And now here's Marianne to introduce you to our guests.
Hello and welcome to Deep Roots, Many Voices. I'm Marianne Kovatch, the Associate Program Director for the Blue Ridge Music Center. And today I'm speaking with Earl White and Tray Wellington about their experiences playing bluegrass and old-time music. Earl White is a dancer and an old-time fiddler who I first met back in the 70s when he was dancing with the Greengrass Cloggers. After years of working in the healthcare field, he's now retired from his day job, and he and his family live on a farm near Floyd, Virginia. Not one to ever sit still, Earl hosts music camps and workshops on the farm, as well as operating a bakery with his wife. Somewhere in there, he also finds time to play the fiddle with the Earl White String Band. Tray Wellington is a bluegrass banjo player from Ashe County, North Carolina. He started playing as a teenager, going to fiddlers conventions and playing with the band Cane Mill Road, and has since gone on to form the Tray Wellington Band. Tray recently moved to Raleigh to join the Pinecone organization as their communications manager. In this conversation, Earl and Tray talk about their experiences as Black musicians, performing at bluegrass and old-time music events, how things have changed over the years, and how they're working to create a better future. Here they are, Earl White and Tray Wellington. Enjoy. So I guess we'll start with just saying, could you introduce yourselves? Earl, why don't we start with you?
Okay. All right. Well, my name is Earl White. You can call me Fiddling Earl White. That was a phrase coined by a good friend, Lightning Wells. I've been pretty much in the old-time string band music and dance community for, wow, pretty long time. I'd say more than 50 years at this point. And, I've started playing the fiddle in 1975. I'm one of the original and founding members of the Greengrass Cloggers. And I've spent a good portion of my life and my time pretty much collecting and playing old-time string band music. And I love it.
Yeah, my name is Tray Wellington. I play three-finger banjo, and I've been playing three-finger banjo for about probably 8.5 years now. And I got started in school, and I was in an area rich with music. I'm from Ashe County, North Carolina originally, and so I definitely was around a ton of great music and a ton of good musicians. And my grandpa was an avid music lover, so I got to hear the music first there. And and banjo, when I first heard banjo, I fell in love with it, and I've been trying my best to just grow in the music and my knowledge of the music, and try to branch out to kind of push the banjo in other directions as well.
Good. So how did you guys both start learning to play? Like where would you actually say that what inspired you, who helped to get you started, and what made you want to play bluegrass and old-time music?
Well, for me, I remember very fondly as a kid when I was just a wee one. And you may not remember, but there was a Mountain Dew soft drink commercial that aired. It was pretty much aired on the radio. There wasn't a whole lot of TV back in those days, but it aired on the radio, and it was Yahoo! Mountain Dew. And following that was the jingle that was being played, as I learned later, by Earl Scruggs and Lester Flats. And every time I heard that, I was, oh my God, I was like really, really into it. I loved it. And
Mountain Dew. Oh, beautiful Sal was a stone-hearted gal, refusing to bill or to coo. But Clem was right smart. He appealed to her heart with that gal getting good old Mountain Dew.
Yahoo! Mountain Dew!
Mountain Dew will tickle your innards cause there's a bang in every bottle.
And lo and behold, I grew up, went to college, started dancing with the group, the Greengrass Cloggers. And it was from our travels in dancing and performing at mostly folk festivals, but going to a lot of fiddlers conventions. Again, at first I was a dancer. I was a dancer and a recorder, because a dancer would record the tunes that you can go back and dance to. But we were dancing in Evergreen Valley, Maine, at a festival, and which was an odd festival. It had the Greengrass Cloggers, Seals and Crofts, Blue Oyster Cult, Alice Cooper. So it had this hodgepodge of groups that had nothing to do with what we did. But anyway, we got up and danced, but hanging out in the green room was this old black man. His name was Papa John Creech, and he played with Little Feat and with Jefferson Airplane, which one of those bands was at the festival too. And he was sitting in the corner playing the instrument as a fiddle. And for me, that was the first experience that I ever had with seeing a black person. There are a lot of black violinists, but here was a black man playing the instrument as a fiddle, versus when he's playing with the bands, he played it more like a violin. And from that, I decided I wanted to play the fiddle. And that following Christmas in 1975, my best friend at that time brought me a fiddle that belonged to her brother-in-law's uncle's grandfather. And it had been ordered through the Sears and Roebuck catalog some 100+ years prior. And they said I could have it. So that's what got me started on the fiddle. I played guitar backing up Greengrass Cloggers who were playing banjo. And so I basically started playing guitar and then segued into fiddle. Dabbled with banjo. We had a clogger, Rick, who also had a music shop, and he was a banjo player. So I took Scruggs style banjo lessons from him for a little while, but being that I didn't own a banjo, it was very difficult.
Awesome. That's such a cool origin story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the way I started with music, I originally started, my first like kind of musical experience was actually in middle school. And I joined the middle school band because I just had an interest in playing just some kind of music. I didn't know what I wanted to play yet. And so I just kind of joined the band hoping that would help me figure it out. And in that I played trombone, like I said. And when I was growing up, I would go spend some time with my grandpa in the summers in Ashe County. I'm originally, I guess I grew up part of my life in Wilkesboro before I moved to Ashe County ultimately, but I was spending a lot of time with my grandpa, and we'd listen to a ton of different types of music. He had this huge CD collection, I remember, just like thousands of CDs and tapes, and a few like LPs. But besides that, I remember I was just getting to hear all this different types of music. It was like country, rock, a little bit of bluegrass, and I remember I was really drawn to like the rock stuff and the country stuff originally, and so I started playing electric guitar probably my 8th grade year, and I picked up trombone in 7th grade year, and then one day we were listening to one of his tapes I'd never heard before, and I got to hear a Doc Watson tape. And I remember hearing Doc. I can't remember the song that he was playing, and it was just a bunch of bluegrass on this tape. It was like Doc Watson. Then the next song was a Jeff White song, who's a great singer songwriter from the Nashville area, and I remember that one too. And those two really stuck out to me. And I was like, dang, I want to learn how to play guitar like that. And so I joined this club at my middle school called the Mountain Music Club at the time, and I was lucky enough to have that. And I got to play. I could start learning how to like do a little bit of flat picking and rhythm on acoustic guitar. And so from there, it was probably about 6 months into the class, I heard banjo for the first time. The teacher, he had never pulled out a banjo, and he was pretty good at it. And he started playing Salt Creek, I remember. And I remember being like, whoa, what is that? And like, I remember I just turned around instantly, and I was like, I want to learn how to play that. And like, I knew it was banjo, but I was just kind of speechless at the time because I fell in love with it. And from there, I went home, and at this point, I was living in Ashe County. So next time I went over to my grandpa's house, I started looking through his CDs and trying to find anything with banjo. I was like I found a Flatt and Scruggs Complete Mercury Sessions recording. I remember that was so cool. And I found that Jeff White CD and a couple other things in there, like something like My Best Bluegrass Hits. But I remember after that, I went and read to my mom and was like, I want a banjo for Christmas. And I finally got one.
What was it like to be, having been like the only black person on stage with the Cloggers and very few other black musicians on stage with you at the time? But what was that like?
Well, I'd say for the most part, most of the gigs that that the Greengrass Cloggers did, you know, they were very much in the public domain, like the Philadelphia Folk Festival. So they were in settings that were a lot more progressive in their being. A lot of those festivals that were in the Northeast, festivals and conventions in the Southeast, they were very different. I mean, I remember going to the Galax Fiddlers Convention and playing my fiddle, and you know, somebody walking up to me and saying, "Oh my God, I've never seen a colored feller play the fiddle before." And my response would be, "You should have seen that green guy down there," you know. But basically, I would just, take it to heart, because to me, it was, it was, for a lot of people, it was a new experience. I remember we were dancing at Union Grove, and there were a bunch of guys who were trying to. I'd say they were hitting on the Clogger girls, and I walked into the tent, and to feel more protected, they all came over to me. Well, of course, that kind of upset the guys who were trying to pick them up. And it was amazing because a bunch of hippies in the audience overheard these guys talking about how they were going to get me outside the tent and knife me. Other than that, again, there were most places that we danced was pretty well received. We danced at the Kutztown Folk Festival, so again, most of the stuff that was in the Northeast, there was basically no tensions. Things that we did in the South, there was a lot more indifference in terms of people feeling that it was something new, feeling that it was something that the Black people basically just did not do. I mean, and in a similar sense, growing up, I mean, because it was not something that prevailed, not something that was highly visible in the Black communities, for me to be doing what I was doing, a lot of friends and relatives, considered it to be the music of white people. And why are you doing that? As time went on, again, my goal had been to educate people the fact that, Black people have been involved with this music as long as it has existed, and vice versa. So there were some trying times. I remember the Greengrass Cloggers being hired to dance at a country club in Greenville, North Carolina. And their demand was that, well, we want to hire the Greengrass Cloggers, but don't bring that black guy. So things like that. Our answer was, well, if you're going to pick and choose who you want to come and dance and perform at your country club, then you're not asking for the Greengrass Cloggers, because we were a multi ethnic group. We had a Korean girl dancing with us. We had Native Americans dancing with us. We had myself, a Black person dancing with. So we were a more of a representative mix of the country, I would say, as compared to a lot of places that we went and we danced against, like Fiddler's Grove, for example, dancing in the clogging competition, and me being the only Black person there dancing with the Greengrass Cloggers, whereas that wasn't something that prevailed on any of the other clogging teams.
Yeah, that's yeah, that was very. Some of those experiences are shocking, and I had some similar things happen when I was growing up and started like going out and performing music and going out to more like social music events. It definitely was something that I remember. I was younger when I first started going out to these things. I was probably 13 or 14 when I started going to fiddlers conventions and whatnot. And I remember at the time I didn't know some of these things that were going on, and I really didn't think twice about them because growing up where I did, you dealt with a bunch of it, racism and stuff, like just going to school, and especially being a Black banjo player going to a public high school, in 20, I guess it was like 20, like 15, I was dealing with a bunch of that already just from my classmates. So definitely going out to events, I didn't really recognize it at the time. And then probably when I was like 16, I had this one experience also at the Galax Fiddlers Convention, ironically enough, where my mom had took me to compete, and her boyfriend is Black, and they were walking out, and somebody came up and said, "You don't belong here," to my mom's boyfriend. And I remember that just being so shocking to me. I was like, whoa, like, and that's when it really kicked in, and I started like paying a lot more attention and kind of reflecting on events that had happened to me. And a couple things, like, you know people would try to always get me in these situations to say it was like okay for them to be like racist around. And it was really weird. Like it was just very strange, and I didn't like it at all in the situations. Like people would try to like. I remember one time I was at Allegheny Fiddlers Convention, and there was a rebel flag way off in the background that I didn't even notice when I was there, and somebody got this picture of me angled just right where it looked I was standing like right in front of it. But I was like 20 feet from it, and just things like that. I remember like that would just like, after I started paying attention to these things, it just made me like so angry to think people would do that. And the more I started touring, I played with this band called Cane Mill Road for about 4 years, and we got to do a lot of touring around the country. And I kind of had a similar experience as you, Earl, with kind of the more away from the like south I went, I did feel like in some ways there wasn't as much tension there
Right.
as a Black person playing this music. And there was certainly instances. There was a festival in Pennsylvania, I remember, where it was like one of the worst experiences. Like people would come up and say all these weird things. Like I'd be playing banjo and just in a jam with somebody, and they'd come up and they'd be like, the banjo originated in Africa, don't you? Like just randomly, like wouldn't say anything to anybody else, and kind of doing like passive aggressive things like that. And I've definitely dealt with like a ton of that. I could go on all day about this though, and some of these experiences I've had. I don't know. It just seems like almost every other place you have to deal with something.
Oh yeah.
Earl, I know you've really been all over the country. Trey, I'm not sure how far Cane Mill Road went, but when you were with them, or how far you've been going with the Tray Wellington Band. But have you really seen like the whole country and felt differences in the West Coast, the mountain region, and not just the North and South?
Right, very much so. In fact, I lived in California for a while, and again, the response, and I guess probably because you just have a much more broader mix of people out there in the West as compared to the Midwest, where people basically, what I found with most of the people in California were people who came from someplace else. Yeah, and it just seemed to be a lot more accepting parts of them, and accepting in the sense that they were probably a lot more used to and accustomed to diversity and seeing diversity in music. I mean, which in music is in my opinion is where you're going to find more diversity, than pretty much anything else these days. I do a program where I point out the fact that old time music is not a black music, it's not a white music. It was a music that was always played together. Otherwise, how did the black musicians learn from the white musicians, and how did the white musicians learn from the black musicians? We were dancing at the Angiers Festival once, and the Bill Monroe Band was backing up the Greengrass Cloggers. And Bill Monroe walked over to me and says, you remind me a lot of this fella I used to play with years and years and years ago. But he didn't mention a name. And part of that too is, you see a lot of pictures of Black people playing the banjo, or Black people holding the banjo, playing the fiddle or whatever, but usually there's no name associated with that person. So again, years later, I'm doing this research where I'm trying to find Black fiddlers. And lo and behold, the person that he was referencing that I reminded him of was Arnold Schultz, who Bill Monroe later on pointed out the fact that, yes, he got his first gig from playing with Arnold Schultz, which was playing a square dance, and that a lot of his style in playing was pretty much developed from playing with this Black guy. So again, it's a lot of it just depends on where you are, and regionally. But I can't put it all on a region, because regions are changing. Regions have people like California moving in from other places. So when you have that diversity, you have somebody move into an area who lived in an area where it's more diverse. They bring their thoughts, they bring their ideas, and their differences in the way they view things as well. So.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that as well, Earl. Definitely not trying to put it all off on one specific area of the country is very important, because it is it's a worldwide issue. It's not even just an America issue. There's racism all over the world in one form or another, and just trying to combat that as a whole, as a music, I think is very important, and try to, like, the work you're doing sounds so important with, like, educating people about the roots of it, because a lot of people don't know these roots, even though it seems like, to us, where we do know this history, it seems like it makes so much sense, but to a lot of people, they just don't understand that.
Very much so.
Yeah, and it's just a kind of idea of just kind of teaching them this.
In old time music, throughout the years, there have been Black players, and there's been a lot more documented. Even some of the Black musicians, they were not necessarily recorded during the early recording periods, but they were documented by a lot of field recorders and Smithsonian and Library of Congress. But in bluegrass, it really kind of started as white men, and so it's probably even more unusual to see you playing in the bluegrass. And just wondering, not only how you've encountered that, and also especially at college, because you went to East Tennessee, and you were probably one of the few Black people in who was a part of their program there in the bluegrass side.
Yeah, definitely in bluegrass. That's something, like, I've some really good friends in the old time community as well. that I talk to quite a bit, and we talk about this issue quite a bit. It comes up just like there is. It seems to be more black people definitely in the old time side of things. For one reason or another, it just seems like the old time community is a little bit more accepting generally. Like I said, I'm not going to speak on the whole thing, but generally more accepting than the bluegrass community, and I think it's kind something I look at, maybe that I've seen is, in old time, it seems to be there's a lot more historical side of things, context with things like when people are like, I've noticed when I went to like old time jams, like people will like, when they're calling a tune, they'll like tell me a little bit about the tune, even if we're just sitting there jamming, which is really cool to me. And I think there's more history there than in bluegrass. People will just call a tune, say like, "Oh, here's this song," and then like it's just expect people to know it, and there's not really much back history to it. And I wonder if that's part of it, kind of dealing with, especially with race issues, is because you're not hearing kind of like a history of this story. Like you don't hear that this tune came from like Lead Belly or somebody like that. You're just hearing, oh, here's this bluegrass tune you should just know. And I think that was I think definitely I deal with quite a bit of that, especially like when you were saying I went to ETSU, I dealt with a bunch of racism there in that program, as far as with other students, especially, and I don't. It was kind of one of those things. At first, I was just like, "Why are they doing this? This is like we're at a university trying to grow and be more open minded to other ideas, and why are they doing this?" And um, you know, they were educated in the matter. It seemed like when they were talking about it, but then their actions didn't portray it. So I think a lot of it is getting over. People getting over their roots. A lot of these people were raised in probably families that were pretty racially biased, and I think one of the biggest things I saw is like so many of these people just kind of I don't want to say stuck in their ways, but I think that's what it was really. Um, Saying some pretty. I'm not going to go into specifics here. I've got told some pretty terrible things by my fellow classmates at ETSU, and had to endure a lot, and it was very trying. And it got me discouraged in the music, but then I kind of realized at a point that I'm like the only like as far as in like directly like I guess like bluegrass music, I'm one of the only three finger banjo players that is out playing. There's definitely I probably know like 10 altogether bluegrass banjo players that are black, and but I'm one of the only ones out performing the music and kind of getting it to a wider audience to a point. Um, at least like I said, the three finger styles, and I just kind of realized I need to be like a beacon of hope for this music to a point to like show people that I'm black and I'm doing this and I love the music, and I'm not going to let other people take things I love away from me.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think also I would just want to add to that. I think when you look at, the difference between old time and bluegrass music, well, the old time music was not necessarily a performance oriented music. And even when you had string bands that were touring, like the Georgia Yellowhammers, you got all these bands that were touring. Well, Jim and Andrew Baxter played with a white string band, and a lot of it was on radio. But whenever they played with this band, it was not led on the fact that that the fiddler was black. That the Baxters were black. But either way, listening to it, because you couldn't see them, you couldn't tell the difference whether they were black or white. So in a similar sense, the bluegrass music segued into more of a performance-oriented music. And when you look at the history of how blacks were not allowed to perform to white audiences, well, the audiences that were being uh, performed to most were the white audiences. And therefore, if you didn't see a black person playing this music, you know, on the stage, then you couldn't make that connection. There's no connection to black people as playing music. Even if you look at a country singer, Charlie Pride, When I was growing up, I loved I loved hearing this guy sing. He was a country singer. But again, in the Black community, because it wasn't My Baby Done Left Me or, some other aspect of soul music, the majority of Blacks that I grew up with did not listen to it, didn't have an affinity to it. So, yeah. But like I said, being that beacon out there, and that's the way I feel about it too, just getting out there. And like I know of a handful of other Black fiddlers, but they're not out there playing the old time string band music, and
Yeah.
you got to be out there doing it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Especially, your comment about the, with it not being a music that is, there's a ton of Black people in, that a lot of the time the Black community does not hear about these artists. And I
Uh-huh.
definitely, today, a lot of that is like, with rap and hip hop,
Right.
a lot of people associate like, they want to call like black, like hip hop and rap music, like Black people's music,
Right.
when music's not a race, it's a form of music. Like anybody can play any kind of music they want to if they want to,
Exactly.
and yeah, I mean, definitely, I just think taking these stigmas away that the musics are to a certain race is a very important thing in growing.
Oh, very much so.
One of the things that I've been interested in is that even when we have at the Blue Ridge Music Center, even when we have a Black performer who is widely known, we still don't have more people in the audience who are just don't have a diverse audience. Uh, and how could we get the word out that this is, as you said, it's not white music, it's not Black music, it's just music, and that everyone is invited.
A lot of it is the promotion side of things. Definitely, like, you know, one Black performer at a venue, for instance, that's, not really going to change people's perception of the music. You have to get more and more Black people starting to be a part of these events on a regular basis. And it's in the music, in like, especially in the bluegrass and old time music industry, it's hard because there's not a lot of Black performers. But the more Black people you can get into it, the more kind of ways you can, you know a lot of people, I think it's important to kind of step away, and you might have to go in some other routes to get people to come in that are more diverse. Like, you might have to get people who are more of like Americana or folk, and that might be Black playing the music. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of getting those audiences in, because um, as I've been to concerts where it's just like an all white crowd, and sometimes it is a little, you know, alarming, because you don't know what's going to be said, and like, if something is said, are you going to be able, like, who's going to have your back there?
Yeah, I think that there's a number of factors. I've been on the advisory group for the CDSS for doing more inclusion and uh, things that basically opens their platform to more diversity. But I think again, there's a number of factors that I feel need to be taken into consideration. Economics is one. Economics is big. A lot of Black people don't have disposable income to go to, no matter who the person is who's performing, they don't have a lot of disposable income to go to the concerts. In addition to that, it's that level of comfort that they might feel going to the venue, going to, wherever it happens to be happening. I mean, there's got to be that level of comfort. Like, for example, I just recently invited an organization here to our farm. Um, a lot of Black people don't camp, for example. A lot of Black people don't spend as near as much time in nature as they used to or as they need to. And as a result, part of the reason for that is because they don't find comfort in going to the state parks. They don't find comfort in going, again, as Tray alluded to, you go someplace and you don't know what's going to be said. You don't know who might potentially say something adverse and what might potentially happen. So you have that factor of fear that keeps a lot of people of color out of certain areas. And part of that was started by that segregation and that prejudice so for a lot of people, especially older people, there is that fear. And if the kids grow up and they are feeling that same fear of that their elders felt, then again, no matter who the audience, who the performer is, we need to find a way to make people feel more comfortable being able to go to these events. I mean, same thing like here in Floyd, there's a Floyd, the Friday night jamboree every Friday night. But when you ride or walk through the town, there's maybe a handful of Black people, handful of Mexicans, handful of people of different ethnicities. And they're generally people who have come from someplace else. But as far as the people of color who are right here in this community, they don't frequent that Friday night jamboree, and it's been happening for 100+ years. So even things like that. I remember when you talk about going to the Gay-like Fiddlers Convention years ago. Anyway, someone had written an article, and they had it published in the local newspaper. And what it was basically talking about was, and addressing, was the fact that at one point there were scores of Black people who went to the Gay Fiddlers Convention. My question, well, what happened? A lot of what I think happened was, as time went on, the older people who played the music, as the younger kids came up, they wanted, they didn't want to continue to associate with it. And so in that way, it kind of got swept aside and lost in a lot of communities. But apart from that, I think it was just mostly the environment that kept more people away, kept more people of color from the Gay-like Fiddlers Convention. And again, to a variety of other venues where you want to attract, you want to create a stage for diversity. But how do you get the people to find that level of comfort to be able to want to be a part of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that was spot on.
Do you have anything else that you want to add to this before we say goodbye? Any final words?
No, I was just going to say thank you for hosting this. I think it's a really great platform for getting people to talk about issues, talk about things, and it's also a good platform for airing the voices of people who are out there actually living the traditions versus people who are basically not. But so anyway, I just want to express my appreciation for what you're doing, Marianne. I've known you for a long time, and it's good to see different hats or different aspects of what people do, so.
Yep. How about you, Trey?
Yeah, kind of same thing for me. I'm really thankful for putting these discussions together. I think it's really cool. And I've learned so much just sitting here and hearing Earl's stories about the music, and it gave me some different things to think about that I didn't think about before, definitely in my activism. And so thank you so much for putting this together. And these are great. Really good.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that the both of you are willing to come and have this discussion. Just want to thank you so much, and hope that things in the future look really great for you guys.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you
So
Thank
much.
you.